And we're live to review the episode Secrets. Over to his Jeffness.
Yes, this is Homicide, Life on the Street, Season 6, Episode 20, entitled Secrets, written by Yaphet Kotto and directed by Ed Bianchi, and originally aired April 17th, 1998. And I haven't actually checked ahead to see if Mr. Morris has a review, so I'm looking at that now. Okay, apparently not, so don't have that, but I do have a brief recap.
Okay.
I can read that, and then, Ben can illustrate with the pictures and what else happened.
Yeah. At the moment, it's rolling automatically.
So, two prominent business executives are found dead within hours of each other. Although the deaths turn out to be suicides, the detectives uncover evidence pointing to a blackmailer who had threatened to expose the victim's most lurid activities. The case becomes even more complicated after the blackmailer is found murdered. Two high-ranking Mahoney associates are shot dead, leading the detectives to realize that the civil war in Georgia Ray's ranks has gotten out of control. As Lewis returns to duty, Kellerman watches Judge Gibbons surprise everyone by dismissing Georgia Ray's lawsuit. Afterward, he publicly calls Gibbons out on the corruption charges and urges him to give up Georgia Ray. So that's the gist of what happened. So, over to Ben.
Okay. Deep end. Now, what we're looking about this is there was quite a bit of type-related stuff in this. So we've got the guy in the country club, Remington Hill. I think he sounds like a razor manufacturer. And maybe an ESTJ, I'm thinking maybe. And that was quite interesting. Like, why didn't he just try to get them ejected? I mean, from the club if he doesn't want them in there. Then we have...
That kid looked like he could be Danvers' son.
Yeah.
Looked a lot like him.
Yep. What else have we got here? And the interesting when you had Frank having when they were talking about the morality, and Frank sort of having an FI moment.
Yeah, and you had Bayless sympathizing with the country club owner guy.
Yeah. I mean, I can imagine that. I mean, the country club owner is like, if he thinks that, if he's the actual owner, why didn't he just boot him out of the club?
Yeah, maybe it's not that simple. Maybe it was like a board, probably. It would maybe take too long or be too difficult.
Yeah. Well, I'm not so sure about the guy. I'm not so sure about the actor playing him. He maybe played him a little bit less than sympathetically, the actor. He maybe have, like, you know what I mean, played him more as a little bit more of a caricature than what he was. Because interesting point of view when Munch talking about the Swiss, and that's actually something that's relevant to him. Whereas at the beginning of the episode, the stuff about him moving to somewhere with a, and you can see Ballard there, really hot for Bayliss. And so we had stuff with Munch at the start, which could have been better because we used to have that between Munch and the short guy. His previous partner.
Oh, Bolander.
Bolander, yes, that's right. Right.
Yeah, actually, I think we forgot to mention it, but like a week or two ago when Munch and Gardy were paired up, and Munch made a reference to Bolander. He said something about another short, round man that he had worked with.
Yep. Yeah, but also a case of like just an excuse for him to show his knowledge. You know, it's just an opportunity to say it. You know, but you should realise life expectancies don't work like that. But
we got the real G, or D, as he actually is, once again playing the whatever you want to call it, the judge of that panel, I guess, of the police panel.
I liked Yaphet Kotto's subtle reaction of being happy, and that's why I did that little screen grab there of him, like when the positive verdict came out. And you know, because TVs at the time weren't fantastic; they had standard definition, but you know, he didn't overact that bit.
Yeah, and I like the line when Gaffney says, you know, if it were up to me, you know, get a transfer, and Lewis says, if it were up to you, I'd take it.
Yeah,
like if you were the shift commander or whatever.
Yeah, it's something like, respectfully, sir, if it were you, I'd take it. I thought he resembled a sort of younger, than he was at the time, Bob Dole, who had just run for president 2 years before. I thought it was interesting when you had a guy coming in, a member of the country club, and he said, Mr. Cahill, and he said, why is this happening? That's 3 losses in 2 days. But to me, I just interpret that as, like, he's just worried about the membership going down.
Yeah.
3 losses.
The reputation of the club.
Yeah. Not 3 deaths, 3 losses in 2 days. Right. What have we got here? But yeah, I mean, I think, because do you think is this our first? He's not a total villain, but is this the first? How many episodes have we had involving an ESTJ?
Well, almost every episode, because G is in almost everything.
apart from G and Gaffney.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I haven't made like a log of, you know, guest characters we've encountered or anything like that.
I did like the ISTJ guy, and he took pride in it, and he took pride in it. They call me Mr. Clean.
Yeah, a few like that stand out, but otherwise, not a lot. So I don't know.
I suppose in this, I would have liked a little bit more detail on what was going on in the country club. Maybe, like, I would have tried to make Remington Hill a little bit more sympathetic about why he did what he did. But you see, the more you do that, the more you take time away from your regulars.
Yeah. So, yeah, in the previous week, we had an episode where, you know, they spent a lot of time on that couple that wasn't necessarily all that interesting. So, you know, it's probably a good thing they didn't spend too much time exploring country club politics in this.
And we sort of came to the conclusion that only would work if you had a really good actor and actress in the role, and they just had a sort of like so-so actor and actress that weren't up to the level of the cast.
Yeah, I think it might have worked better for a show like Law and Order, where you have you have less of a regular cast, so you have a little bit more time to kind of focus on the quirks of the people involved, and they do. But as you know, the pace of it they keep up, but you know, there's not as much. Homicide doesn't really need to do that because they have enough of a cast of the regulars that they can spend time on them, and it's better suited, better idea in general than showing people that we don't know.
Yeah, Ballard seemed less green in this episode than in the previous one, where she sort of like needed the advice of Garty in the previous episode.
Yeah, well, I guess Yafakoto wrote this episode. Maybe he's a little bit, he's writing maybe more from the perspective of making the detectives look better.
Yeah.
I wonder if this came from any real life experience he had, or whether it was entirely a made up story.
I don't know. I think it was pretty good though. I mean, I'd give it, and I do like the supporting storyline involved. Now, what's going on with his hair there? It looks as if it's a bit darker.
No, it happens sometimes.
Maybe it was
winter, I guess, when the show is. When you spend less time in the sun, out in the sun. Yeah.
Maybe he dyed his hair for something. No, another plot. Because let's have a look. Because it's still got like quite light eyebrows, but that was weird. Maybe he was doing something else.
It's kind of slicked back too, so it's a different look than if it was forward. It could be just kind of highlighting.
I mean, all that slick back stuff, that was early 90s. I remember that. All the gel look, the wet look, gel look. I don't know if you ever went in for that, Jeff.
No. Other than when I was acting, some certain plays I was in, I was supposed to do that. There was something else I was going to say, and now it's gone out of my head. And something I was like, I don't want to forget to mention that. Now I don't remember.
Well, if I play these on, maybe the image will pop up.
Maybe. Or it might have been something that you didn't take an image of, and I was going to say something about that. I don't know.
Yeah, I quite like the episode. I think it could have been better. The actor playing Remington Hill could have been more sympathetic to the character. It seemed to.
Well, I guess they used Bayless to sort of say that some people could relate to his mentality. So it was sort of supported by that, I guess you could say. Which I thought was, again, in character for those two in terms of Pendleton having more of a indignant response to it and Bayless relating to what he said, because he kind of always had that same mentality about.
I mean, you could say that. Before
softening a bit on that.
Yeah. I mean, before they committed suicide, he's probably also thinking, hang on a minute, people are being cheated on by this affair. I want to put an end to it. But I'm just wondering how the club is arranged where all of this stuff is going on.
Oh, yeah, I think I remember what I was just going to ask, because I had said that you might enjoy this one more than me. And the reason I thought so was because it sort of brings up certain ideas, like, what the responsibility is for someone. If someone kills himself, someone didn't actually murder them, but they sort of drove them to suicide, like, what they would actually, because they cover it briefly, but not very much in terms of, Danvers talking about the legality of what they could actually get the guy for. But obviously once he ends up dead, it's funny because that recap said it complicated things, but it actually didn't. It simplified things.
Yeah.
Because then it just became a straight up murder.
Yeah.
The cameraman taking out him, as opposed to trying to prosecute a guy who didn't actually pull the trigger.
Yeah, it became less interesting.
So that's why I was like, well, you might have enjoyed, considering that particular moral question.
Yeah, I think he would have still been. I think now it would still be considered a crime, because you're still using that sort of coercive force on someone. if you're threatening to release the information.
Right before the scene where they show Danvers talking about it, I was thinking, because I've obviously been watching Law and Order along with this, and I'm thinking to Jack McCoy on Law and Order, he definitely would have come up with a reason to prosecute the guy. He would have definitely said, "We're going to do it in some capacity," because they show a lot of episodes where he tries to kind of twist things into a way he can prosecute someone for something when he thinks they're responsible for the death, even if the letter of the law doesn't say that.
Lawyers love old laws not being repealed that they can use to get somebody on. Some obscure law.
Yeah.
Might even be some obscure Baltimore law from before the United States.
Yeah, it's possible.
Would they have done something that? Do you reckon they might have done something like that in? I know Law and Order's set in New York, but has he ever pulled out a law that was 250 years old?
Not that I remember specifically, but no, obviously I haven't seen all the episodes yet. But they did have an episode that was obviously sort of based on the Michigan militia stuff. Because it had this group that said that they were not guilty of breaking the laws of New York because they were unconstitutional under the, federal stuff that trumped that or whatever. So they, made the case about that. But that wasn't quite the same thing you're asking about, I don't think. But anyway. I thought the stuff with Bayless and Ballard was the least interesting thing in the episode. It wasn't. That was the point. They really with Bayless's character, I thought they made him more interesting and then less interesting. It was sort of when they moved in the direction of the stuff with him and the uncle and kind of covering that kind of stuff. And I'm not saying that it's unrealistic that he would, as we talked about in a previous episode, that he would have some, for lack of a better word, sexual identity issues. But, where they've actually gone with it really isn't that interesting to me. So that's why I guess I feel about this is that, that the little, it's just sort of small talk at the end of the episode, but it didn't really do much for me, I guess is what I'm saying.
I think that the only thing that was good about it was the way that Carrie Thorne played Ballard being hot for Bayless. I thought that was quite cute.
Do you think she still was after what he told her, though?
Oh yeah, just the eyes that she's giving him. I mean, she's not sort of giving him the eyes the way that the bartender woman is doing it as part of her job.
Well, she took it when he said the thing about have you thought about a relationship with a woman? She initially took it as it was just a sexual fantasy of guys.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I took screen grab, but yeah, towards the end, and then she got turned up. But then, she is definitely interested in Bayless. That's definitely how it was played, in my opinion. The eyes that she is definitely hot for Bayless.
And of course, we haven't talked about any yet the stuff with Kellerman and Judge Gibbons.
Yeah, that was pretty SP. Where it's I mean, the FBI wouldn't be happy with their strategic mindset, where he's just going in there and rubbing his nose in it when they told him that in secret.
Well, yeah. And without spoiling anything that happens, I would say that we've seen some not so smart Kellerman moves, and that may be the latest one. Because there's one thing to go there and sort of gloat about it or whatever, but it's another thing to start actually saying stuff at the judge where other people could hear him.
Yeah. Well, but it's still was it not so? But was it still believable to you though, Jeff?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was.
Because to me, it's like sometimes with the STPs, it's like one moment, it's like they're really smart, and then not so much.
Yeah, because it's not, it's a spontaneous act where it's like he went there for one purpose, but it's like he can't help himself in that particular moment from, piling on, as opposed to letting it go. And just, I think if Lewis had been there, he probably would have tried to stop him from doing that. Probably. But he's had his moments too, of course, where he punched George Ray, so, it would depend. But I think under that circumstances, Lewis wouldn't have been provoked to say anything to the judge. He probably would have tried to hold Kellerman back from doing it.
Well, I mean, in that situation, Lewis had already been kicked in the bollocks by George Ray. So physically he was in a lot of pain. It's just that the way he reacted to that. And plus the charge was excessive force.
Yeah.
Yeah, all in all, anyone listening to this will think, oh, how come you're not saying much? Well, because we've reviewed a lot of episodes already. And
yeah, well, this episode, I'm not going to say it didn't have anything to talk about, but, beyond sort of the central question that I already brought up, there's not necessarily a whole lot that was really breaking new ground here. So there's a lot of sort of little small things that are, good homicide dialogue. And, but, the guy that ends up being the murderer when it comes to Mr. Hill, he's not really that interesting a character. He's kind of dumb, and they get him to confess really quickly. So it's like, there's not really a lot of give and take between them. There's a little bit with Mr. Hill, but even that is just sort of that one scene. So
yeah, I would think, if I was in the role of script editor, I would look at this and I would think, okay, you could have a better scene with Frank, because we've seen better speeches by Frank where he's like doing his FI thing and he's talking about morality. Like, you could have a moment for Frank, I would want the Hill character to be played better by the actor, not as much as a caricature, because there were certain little bits where it was like it felt like the actor playing the part didn't respect the part. I just felt a little bit of that, but that's just a suspicion of mine. And try and do a little bit more detail on the. And plus, I wouldn't have had him killed off. I wouldn't have had.
Yeah, it makes it less of an interesting case once that happens. Especially having it being solved that quickly. It's one thing if he does get killed off, but then, even if they suspect who might have done it, that they, couldn't find him, he disappears or something, or there's more than one suspect, that could have done it, and that at least there's an unsolved murder at the end, if they were going to go that way about it. As it is, it's kind of like it almost seems like, I have no proof of this or whatever, but it almost seems like a network directive to wrap that up.
Yeah.
Like, wrap this up in a neat way where you can have someone who's definitely responsible for a crime.
Yeah.
And have the audience satisfied that everybody got what was coming to them.
Yeah.
In the end. Ballard even says that he got what was coming to him. So.
Yeah. And I suppose I would have liked it a little bit more of a battle of wits between the razor manufacturer, that's it, Remington Hill, and Frank. Like the way there was between Alfie Woodard and Frank.
Yeah, he had a much more of a good confrontation with those two.
Yeah, because you
or even had more. even had more between Frank and Bayless about it.
Yeah.
They were a little bit more drawing their lines in the sand.
Yeah, so just really.
But yeah, it kind of seemed like, actually, in some ways, it seems similar to the first episode that Yaphet Kotto wrote, where it seemed like the premise was a good idea, but then the execution kind of lacked in some ways. Like there were certain things about it that just made it not as good as it could have been. But yeah, next week's episode there'll be much more to talk about. Actually, the next three, because the last three of the season, there won't lack for topics of discussion.
So how come there's an odd number of episodes? How come there's 23?
I don't know.
Is it because
what NBC told them to do? I guess.
Is there one short next season? Is it 22 next season?
I believe that's true. Yeah. So it may just be that. It may be that that it was planned to be 22, and that the Homicide producer said that they showed because this with a two-parter. So maybe they originally planned it to be one part and decided they had too much to fit in one part.
Yeah,
needed to make it two.
And also they might said, "Oh, we need an extra episode to fit this thing in." And maybe in this particular episode we're just reviewing now, they had to put that thing in with Kellerman and the judge.
Actually, you may be right about that, and I'll say why I think that later, because it's a bit of a spoiler. Yeah. But I think there was a behind-the-scenes decision. I'll just put it that way that may have necessitated that. But anyway.
Yeah. I mean,
well, go ahead.
I do like the Kellerman storyline, and I think that he's a good actor who plays. And there's an example of, I think you do need a good actor and actress to play an ESTP to make them sympathetic. To show that other side to them.
Yeah, well, it certainly makes for a more interesting character, sure. When you have
because otherwise, when you
caricature.
Yeah, because when it's an actor or an actress who's not quite as good, the ESTP will come across more of an a-hole, in my opinion.
Yeah, Ken Schreiner on General Hospital, who plays Scott Baldwin, I think he's another example of someone who does an effective job of showing kind of both sides of that, because you see why, Morgan and I briefly talked about that the other day, where you see why he's an effective lawyer, because he's a lawyer, and why people think he's a jerk, but yet he's effective at certain things. So you can see, and some of those things accomplish things that are for the quote unquote good guys. So you see why people would like having him around to accomplish the things that they want to accomplish, and why women would be attracted to him, for instance, for the qualities that he has, but also why a lot of people would be put off by him. So
right.
So and Kellerman would be much the same way.
Right, so I will give this episode about 8 out of 10. What do you give it, Jeff?
I'm waffling between 6 and 7, but I'll go ahead and round up to a 7.
Ooh, so that's pretty low for you. That's pretty low for you.
Yeah, it's on the low end of a 7.
Yeah.
It's kind of more around the 6.5 area. But the reason is kind of what I said, that the premise is good, but again, there's some issues, but there's also a lot of good little bits along the way. So it's like, it's still better than... at this point, I think there's only been one episode, maybe 2. I can't remember that I actually rated a 6. Those had something in it that actually made me sort of cringe at one point about how, there were scenes that I'm just like, this is just not very good. And this episode really didn't have anything like that. I mean, I guess the closest came at the end with the Bayless stuff, but even that wasn't really cringeworthy. It was just kind of boring. So that's what keeps this from getting a 6. So I'll give it a 7, but I'll say that it's just barely floating above the 7 line for the good stuff in it.
I also think that maybe that scene should have been written with more subtext, where Bayless was hinting at his sexual preferences rather than coming out and saying it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess they did it that way because they wanted there to be kind of this moment where he declared something, but at the same time, yeah, it did seem a little bit kind of contrived. I don't know if that's the right word, but it just kind of tacked on to make a statement about something, but not really accomplishing anything. So I don't know.
And then
And
they might forget about it again, and then Bayless is being straight, and then
yeah, well, I would say that the stuff that's followed up on that doesn't really happen as much till the following season, but in the remaining 3 episodes of this season, there's not a lot about that. But
yeah.
there is still plenty of Bayless, and next week's episode will definitely have an impact on his life. But anyway, so you said 8, I'll say 7. Average is 7.5. Join us next week for a very interesting, unique episode called Finnegan's Wake.
Oh, I expect references. Bye-bye.
Bye.